So about my background, I studied economics, political philosophy, then I did a PhD in collective intelligence, and this is like what brought me to this type of topics. So let's do it. The question to start is if rationality is always a good thing for making decisions, right? We tend to think that rationality is a good thing for making decisions, but there are some times where reasons can be very bad, like when there is racism or some groups that try to just move forward their own interests. And what randomness makes is that you have a pool of options, and the option that is going to be chosen is not going to be chosen because of reasons. It's going to be chosen because of randomness. So any of those can be selected. And so the blend break, what it introduces is the break of what it's called irrationality, a non-rational decision in the selection process. This means that the lottery decision is going to be impartial, it's going to be amoral, and a lot of different things that may be important for some political systems, especially when we fear that bad reasons may be used to make a decision. So this is what's called the lottery principle. You may want to consider lotteries when you fear that some bad reason could interfere in a decision process, right? So, we spend a lot of time in blockchain governance debates about what is the best way to create a voting system, like quadratic, like X voting system. In the end, it's a question of how we aggregate preferences. So, voting is a process that is based on reasons, which may be good or bad. And lotteries is a process that is based not on reasons, right? And this excludes both good and bad reasons. So let's see now a bit of some examples of how this has been used in the history of political systems. Because, you know, we sometimes think that we are inventing stuff, but we are just rediscovering things that have been working for a long time in different regimes. So, who knows this guy? So, this guy is the guy who created what we know as ancient Greek democracy. You know, there was this dictator called Hippias. He overthrew the Hippias regime, leading a popular rebellion, and then he created what we know as the Greek democracy, the assembly, and how people vote, etc. And you know what he did after doing these reforms? Yeah, of course, what anyone should do is disappear. And so no one knows where he went, but the thing is that he created the system and then left it for the citizens to manage it. So, you know who did that, right? So, this is a basic structure of the ancient Greek system. Citizens can participate in the assembly, all of them are allowed, provided they are, like, of course, male and not slaves. And the assembly is going to choose courts, council, and magistrates. And look how important was random selection in choosing people for public office. Look, 99% of all the people who were in public office were chosen by lot, and only 1% chosen by election. Only those who were in very high levels in the army, generals, were chosen by lot, because it required very specialized knowledge. So, the council the assembly chose 500 citizens selected by lot, and every year it rotated. The council wasn't like the executive power, it was in charge of the day-to-day running of the police. And they had this really specific selection process. You know what this is? A pinakion is a Greek ID token. Each citizen had one of these with their name on it. When there was the day of the lottery process, they went to the lottery machine. You know how it's called? I've been talking to Sandy for years about this machine. And this is a machine that they use for random selection. You went with your token, it's like a bronze plate like this size, you put this into a slot into the machine, and then came some guy from the political process and put some white and black dice into the machine, but you are fixed on the side, and they have like this, I have the logo here, but it's like icosahedron dice, 20 face dice, And if you had on your row white dice, you were selected, black dice, you went home. And this is where the council met. So why was this used, why was this done this way? So the Athenians had like different families that were struggling for power. And they were very afraid of one of them concentrating too much power into the polis, right? So our best way to do this was, okay, instead of making elections which can lead to patronage or can lead to collusion, let's just select them like randomly. And they used this method. And on top of that, if there is some, even so randomness sometimes can be in favor of someone, it changed every year. So they always rotated, so any potential gain that could be done in the short term by some very lucky random selection was then destroyed the next year when it changed all over again. So the two keys of the Greek democracy were random selection and rotation. If you want to learn more about how this process works, I highly recommend, this is a classical book about the Hitler. This is the classical book, is from the 1930s. And if you want to learn more about how the whole political system worked in Greece, this great book by Josiah Over, Democracy and Knowledge, is how everything, and a lot of the things that we are discussing in blockchain governance, these guys knew already. Okay, let's move forward some time to the Renaissance, and another important city where there was the high use of sortition was Venice. You know, Venice was a trading empire, and it was known as the Repubblica Serenissima. Why is that? Because the most serene republic was intended to give all the merchants of the Middle Ages or of the Renaissance the confidence that rule of law was enacted there, right? Remember Shylock's Merchant of Venice? There is a trial scene, and in the trial scene, the judge says, okay, I know that this contract is not cool, a pound of flesh, but a contract is a contract. And if we don't comply with contracts, no one is going to come to Venice to trade, right? So the thing is that this image of Venice as some very strict rule of law place and very like serene place was built on top of like a gunpowder arsenal, because the social structure were again of some families that were struggling for power. And these families, you know what, they have private armies, and they hated each other. So they had to find a way for these guys to like coexist in peace in Venice and preserve the rule of law that was very important for all of them to prosper from trade. You know this painting from, you know who painted this one? Canaletto. And what is this building? Who went to Venice? Yes. The Palazzo Ducale. And who lived there? Of course, the doge of Venice. The most famous doge is Leonardo Loredan. The doge was the president of the Venetian Republic. And the interesting thing about the doge is that most of the political positions, most of the office were selected by lot in Venice. But the doge selection process was very specific. Yeah. I'm going to tell you a bit about this. So this is how it is described. That time this is like the blueprint for how you select the doge. And it started in the Concilio Grande. This is 1,000 people, like the patricians who participate here. It was in the Palazzo Ducale. And then you had lot selection of all the 1,000 people, 30 members elected there. And these 30 guys went to a different room and draw again by lot only 9 of them. So these 9 then went on to voting to nominate 40 members out of all the 1,000 members, and the Netherlands 7 votes apiece. So these 40 members, they went to a different room, and then they selected by lot 12 members, right? And these 12 members, so you think it ends here? No. These 12 members selected 25 members by voting. And you know what these 25 guys did? They selected 9 members out of the 25 by lot. And these 9 members then nominated 45 members by voting, and these 45 members drew 11 of them by lot. And this 11 were called the Undici, and the Undici nominated by voting 41 members, and the 41 members, you know what they did? They selected the doge. So this was the extremely highly sophisticated random selection process that they had in the Republic of Venice to make sure that no one could tamper with the process, right? It was like a shuffling machine of people, right, you know? And the problem they had in Venice was that you don't want people to run for office. You want the office to select the man that should have it, right? And this made politics a non-attractive career for people because you could do nothing to become the doge. It was so random that you could not like try to create your alliances. And the random selection also gave all the families the chance to rotate in the doge. So this time is you, and so it rotated. And this created like peace among of them, right? If you want to learn more about how the process works and the mathematics behind it, there's this very good research paper from Hewlett Packard. I don't know why they research doge selection, but who knows? And these guys, the thesis is that the doge election process. Okay, I'm sorry, you were taking a picture. they call that security theater. Okay, when you are a merchant and you are thinking of Venice as a good place to do business, when you see that they have this very sophisticated process, then you can trust that the rule of law will stay, right? So this is what they call a security theater. Even if the process didn't work very well, it still gave the impression that these guys knew what they were doing in politics. If you want to learn more about the Renaissance and Sortition, I'm not going to delve into this because of time, but Machiavelli, whom we all know from The Prince, in his discourses on living, he was a Republican. Like everything he wrote of The Prince is contrary to what he actually did as a politician. He was a Republican and he believed strongly in people having the right to government and the use of randomness in selection. And so this takes us to the United States. The Sortition was an important part of the discussions in the time of the early days of the country. So, you know, they overthrew the English rule, and now they have to figure out how they create a state that works, basically, the first time ever at large-scale democracy. And we have, like, these guys, the Federalists, were basically intellectuals and politicians writing on, okay, how should the US work? How should the political system work? Should we have a president, a king, like a Congress, 2 chambers, 1 chamber? All these questions they wrote in these Federalist papers. There is one guy that is not very well known. It is well known, but not as much as the others, and he's called Thomas Paine. And this guy, among other things, he created some ideas based on universal income are based in some writings from him, an agrarian society. And he suggested a method of selecting the president in order to avoid that the federal government would be captured by the elites of the powerful colonies. So this is what he suggested. The colonies would choose delegates to send to Congress, and then when Congress started, they would select by lot 1 colony out of the 13, and then those 13 members from that colony would choose 1 member who will be president for 1 year, right? So this is what he suggested, because he was thinking of how the Greeks did it, right? The rotation plus random selection would tend to break consolidation of power. And then this is the last time that sortition was really discussed on a serious level. It didn't pass, of course, as you know. And then it declined. Why did sortition decline in the political thought history? Because of 2 reasons. One, because luck started to be seen as an application of responsibility. Like, if you like throwing a dice, started to look more like gambling than to like some legitimate way to select people for office. And also because the classical ideal of the republic, of people like working for the common good, fell. And what we have is liberal democracies where you have like people selecting some representative, and this guy governing for a couple of years, and then the people selecting again another, like giving them more time if they did well, and or ousting them of government if they didn't do well. So this ended in what we know as partisan politics, and that's exactly what the ancient wanted to avoid when they used the sortition. So the ancient Greek wouldn't recognize our systems as a republic, right? These days, there is a movement that is bringing back the early ideas of sortition. If you want to learn more, these are called the Clerotarians. You know, Hélène Landemore, is the French one, she's great. But these guys are writing about this. And how this works today is you have what they call mini publics. You select a number of people from citizens, and then these guys, they're selected randomly, and they are consulted in policy making, right? They're actually doing one of these in France now. Hélène Landemore is leading this, and this is for making policy for climate change. And this just took place like last week. And then the thing is that all these ideas of sortition and how to create these political processes that are more transparent and less prone to collusion are very likely to pass in existing democracies now. But the thing is that we have the chance, since we don't have to reform all legacy regimes, we have the chance of, like, when we overthrow these monarchies, as the US did in the 18th century, we can't build the institutions that we need to build for the coming time of the internet to be better governed. So this is the blockchain thing. So we're building these institutions, and we can choose whatever we want because there are no limits now, right? No legacy to reform. So I think that sortition can be a really good way to do it. And how we should think about this? Well, when do we want reasons to be part of the decisions? When we see that there is a very high chance of bad reasons becoming part of the decision, then let's use sortition. So we sanitize those bad reasons. And when we want people to express their preferences and we don't see the possibility of bad reasons being important, then yes, we can use traditional voting systems, and quadratic or whatever is to be discussed. So you want to learn more about this idea? There are like two Bibles of random selection. One of them is The Luck of the Draw by Peter Stone, a professor at the University of Dublin. This is great. And the other one is Oliver Dowden, The Political Sortition, and this is a history of how random selection was used throughout the history of politics. Well, we can learn a lot from this. So, thank you very much. Hope that helps to think about it.